Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to On the Record, hosted by Dekel Bor and presented by Shore. My name is Louis Marks. I'm here at the Rope-A-Dope Room outside the great city of Philadelphia. And this week we've decided to pre-record in the hopes that we get to spend some time with family and friends on the U.S. holiday. Thank you for joining in, and thank you to Shore for the platform here. Each week, Dekel Bor interviews some of the greatest producers, engineers, and mixers of our time, and this week is no exception. Dekel got to sit down with the Executive Vice President of Resonance Records. His nickname is the Jazz Detective, as he has scoured the corners of the world finding rare and previously unreleased jazz recordings from some of the biggest names, including John Coltrane, Wes Montgomery, Bill Evans, and many, many more. I'm talking about the great Zev Feldman, and when we got into pre-record, I was stunned at the backdrop, as you will be as well. Dekel Bor has performed with jazz legends Johnny Griffin, Reggie Workman, Pat Martino, Billy Hart, and many more. It seems like he knows everybody in this business, and he brings great enthusiasm and love for music to the show. His new release, Let Love Rule, is out on Rope-A-Dope. You can find it at dekelbor.bandcamp.com. And thank you for viewing. Please remember to click the bell for notifications, as this is an ongoing weekly show. So now let's drop in to Dekel Bor Berlin and the great Zev Feldman in Los Angeles.
All right. Welcome to my Berlin home. This is going to be a very, 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 very special one for me for many, many reasons. I've been waiting for this for a long time. So to introduce my very, very special guest. To anyone who's joining us today, this series is about me reaching out to my mentors and to my peers and to my pals and to my friends and to my heroes and asking for advice. I'm working on a new album. This album has been out for a few months now. It's in consideration for a Grammy in 4 categories, which is beyond my comprehension. But the fact that you guys are digging it means a lot. So I'm working on the next one, and I have a lot of things that I'd like to know. So instead of hanging out backstage with my favorite people, which we cannot do right now, we found the coolest, best next thing for you. So today's guest has been an underground hero for many, many, many of us in the scene. I first heard about his work when I started hearing from a lot of my guitar pals that there's a new underground Wes Montgomery album that just came out that's never been heard before. It's before he got famous, when no one kind of knew him back in Indianapolis. And it's kind of been the talk of the town in New York for about at least a year. Have you heard that? Have you heard that? Have you heard that? And then I started hearing this guy's name pop up in, the most incredible projects ever worked. So we're going to speak about that and more today. Without any further ado, my very, very special guest from Los Angeles, Mr. Zev Feldman. Zev, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dekel. It's great to be with you. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm so happy to see you again. It's so good to see you. How is everything? You guys are safe? You guys are well?
We're doing okay out here, thankfully. Thankfully, doing okay, man. And congratulations on your new album, by the way.
Thank you. It means a lot, man, especially from you. So to anyone who's got any free time on their hands this year, which all of us do, you're about to come out with a string of albums that is almost unheard of. It's just one masterpiece after the other all at the same time. So first of all, I got my favorite bottle from Italy open just for you today. I want to congratulate you on this incredible string of releases. So I know it's still early in the morning for you, but it's nighttime here.
I'll toast you with my little bottle of water.
There you go. Here's to you, and here's to all those new releases which we're talking about today. But before we get to them, I want to hear about your story. When did the jazz bug hit you? When was the first time you felt like, oh my God, this is unbelievable, and I'm in love?
You know, it's interesting because jazz is a part of the bloodline of my family. I have many musicians in my family. My great uncle actually is the first person in the 1963 edition of the Leonard Feather Encyclopedia of Jazz. This is
Wow.
my grandmother's brother
What
named Alvin
capacity?
A. Barron. Yeah.
In what capacity was it? Was in the further edition?
Well, my 1963, my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, played with Les Brown and the Band of Renown,
Wow.
Sentimental Journey. They played tours all around the world with people like Bob Hope. He played with Jack Teagarden and Horace Heidt and Dave Pell, and he's just really a hero of our family. And we have also, my great grandparents had a family band. There were seven children, and everyone played a musical instrument. Jazz, though, has been something that's been very central in my family. My father, to answer your question, turned me on. He would play Wes Montgomery and Nancy Wilson and Jimmy
Which
Smith.
album? Do you remember which West album was it for
Yeah,
you?
I have to tell you, my father was really big into bumping and a lot of that later period West. Although it was interesting.
I don't have it here, but I just found an original pressing of Bumpin'.
Oh, really?
Sounds amazing.
My father has great taste in music, and I remember being a little boy. He would pick me up from summer camp, and in the afternoons there was a radio program in the Washington D.C. area called Caravan on WDCU FM, and you would tune in at 5 o'clock, and the theme music was Wes Montgomery doing Caravan
Ah,
from Moving West, and I'll
yeah,
just
yeah.
remember how I loved hearing that song every day. But I think I became primed, and there was a lot of, I think the key word is self-discovery and
Yeah.
just being generally interested. Dekel, I'm sure you too, man. We dig for things. We find things that catch our ear, and then we keep investigating, right?
So I can tell that my West, I don't know if I should say love affair or mad obsession, but it started with Smoking on the Half Note. I got that on CD, and man, I think that's all I listened to for like a year. That's all I listened to, and then I think it was Passover, and I could choose my gift, and I asked for the box set of the Riverside recordings. It came with that nice booklet, and
You mean this? How do
yeah,
you like that? On cue, just like that. You're right here in my library, so I have things at a hand's
absolutely,
grab.
absolutely. And then I remember just taking rides with my dad in his car and just kind of putting the different CDs on. And just like you say, it's a discovery. Like you immerse yourself in it, and you discover things, and you learn things, and it's just there's just it's just kind of and that's one more direction that led me actually to your work, because you came out with the tapes from Seattle, the Seattle tapes from the famous tour of the Wynton Kelly and West. And that was for me, I mean, I was like, I got to get this guy on the phone. I mean, this like 2 years ago or something. Like I got to know what else he's hiding in those vaults. So you want to talk about some records?
I do. I just got to say though, like working on these projects, when I hear you talk about your enjoyments and listening,
No, no, no,
it's
no, no,
it,
no, no. You're insulting me. This is not about enjoyment. This is
it
don't belittle this. Listen, you be honest. For guys like us to come up with uh like if there's like an album or a period of an artist that you are madly in love with, and I have that kind of relationship with almost any artist that I love. Like there's gonna be a period in their musical journey that resonates with me the most. I find. And you kind of exhaust whatever available recordings you have from that period. Now imagine you do that for 15 years or something like that. And then someone like you comes out with something that's completely out of the blue for someone like me. That's I mean, it's like boom. It's 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 life changing. I mean, just be able to hear that he has a different tone. He's using a vibrato effect. I mean, Wes with effects for a guitar player is like wow. And just a way to hear them with a different basis and to hear them, slightly like a couple months later. I mean, everybody talk about Wynton Kelly in the early years, in the Miles years, in the Sarah Vaughan years. but there's a pocket of time around 64, 65, 66, and they would back a lot of home players. Joe Henderson, Big Joe, a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he just sounds, he's kind of out, he's not so young anymore. And he has just, he's kind of out of this world. I mean, there's a sense of, it's, the stew has been on the fire for, for the time that it needed. I'm just, I
feel
go on and on.
I feel the same way about 64 to 66 from Wes. You talk about these half note recordings that, for instance, Pat Metheny has put up on a pedestal and shared his enthusiasm publicly. There is something magical that's happening, but I think it's also the cohesiveness of these guys that were playing together night after night. And the half note stuff's unbelievable. There's also half note stuff that hasn't been officially released before. And you hear Wes playing out on a vamp, and you hear all sorts of extended playing that
Are we talking about those? There was this double CD at Verve with the big band on one and the quartet on the other. You know what I'm talking about.
I believe I
Misty. They're playing Misty, and they're playing a whole lot of songs you don't always hear in the repertoire.
It's been exciting for me though, because I've been listening to Wes so long, like yourself. So you can imagine when we started working with Jim Wilkie and Charlie Puzo Jr. from the Penthouse Jazz Club with that tape archives, it gave us an opportunity of really going in, finding and looking for things. And that was one of the standout, groupings of recordings that had never been released before. It's also interesting that Ron McClure is on bass too. Yeah.
Walk me through the experience. You're walking into this archive that it's like filled with the greatest jewels of the 60s. I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, is this like a Miles quintet to the right and a Colton quartet to your left?
Well, first of all, this idea of the vaults is kind of like it's a mental state of mind, shall we say, because oftentimes, here, you want to know, you see these two plastic cases right here? Those are digital transfers from the Penthouse Club. The reels of tape are in Seattle. They're also here in Los Angeles with the family, but it's about vetting out the process. It's listening to the music. We can be a kid in a candy store, man, but you can't eat everything. Not everything is meant to come out. You got to vet stuff. You got to listen to it. You got to hear what it is. But regarding the tape vaults, but the vaults though, it's about, I get digital transfers that are made. Then we listen to it. I don't have a reel-to-reel machine here at home. I wish I had a Studer here or something applicable. It would be nice to have that. But, I work heavily with recording engineers who will digitize files. They send them to me. And then I'll work perhaps with a music consultant like yourself or trumpeter David Weiss or another individual. And we really try to listen carefully. There's a distinction between good and great, Dekel. And we really have to look out for the artists and their legacies and make sure that we're issuing only the very best. And sometimes, I hate to say it, but sometimes not all the best comes out. Not for me. I think that we have to scrutinize and make those larger decisions about these artists and their legacies.
So I gotta ask you about this because, I'm one of those guys. I started performing like full time when I was 16 or 17, and I'm 40 now. So most of my life was playing to audiences where people were not holding a camera phone and not holding Zoom machines. It was a very authentic, homogenic situation. And it allowed you to explore things in a very healthy way. I mean, if you made a mistake, it wasn't the end of the world. I mean, it was about the experience. It wasn't about a certain level of perfection to the performance. And nowadays, I mean, you go to a club and the cats themselves are taping the gig so they can upload it to their social media. I mean, even a gig now is a product. And there's something about going on tour and just letting the music kind of work itself and not worry if it's like this or like that. and just kind of being in the process and not in the product side of things, that I think is we're kind of losing with today's culture. So I want to ask you, how do you decide which tapes should end up on record and which tapes we should honor the original state of it, of just being a great gig?
Well, I think it comes down to how great the music is. I think there's different methodologies for different A&R people, but for me and what I do with George Claben, or actually lately what I've been doing with Blue Note Records, is really making sure that we have the best. It's such an important decision to make. So, you want to choose the right material. You want to make sure that the music is great versus good, perhaps. And there's all sorts of those critiques, those factors that come into play. Also, the fidelity could be an issue, but really, at first, it comes down to the music. Is the music cooking? Do you like the music? Is it special? Is there something historically significant? But is the music great? Story's great, but the music is the first story to tell. Hey, how is it burning? Did it move you when you listen to it? I think Tommy LaPuma had this expression. Does it make you shake your ass? I don't think I'm going to say it like that, but there's got to be something that moves you, man. And like with the music that we put out, and I get to work on so many of these productions, when you hear something for the first time, though, there is that moment of honesty where you're looking at it and you're listening to this, and it's easy to get blinded to, but you have to know, does it move me? And then you really got to listen again. Then you got to listen again, and you got to listen carefully.
I can tell you that I've been in that situation so many times. I mean, I just came out with an album that's been getting a lot of attention, but I recorded so many times before, and we either shelved the release after it was released because I felt like I didn't sound good enough. And there are at least two albums was Robert Sagan producing in New York that we released it, and like as soon as the license was up, I just shelved the release. And there were so many times where I'm at the studio with the band, and then you take the tapes home and you listen to them, and you have to ask yourself, is this it? Is this what I want people to know me for? Is this? And that's a very difficult question to ask. And this is something that I can do with, for my own music. I mean, you're basically holding other people's music in your hand. I mean, the responsibility is that much time greater.
Yeah, because, the truth is there are some record labels that would probably take everything just to put it out. There are a lot of these collectors, nefarious labels where artists aren't paid, if you know what I'm talking about. There's that word bootleg that slips in. And you know what, though? But you got to look at really what's doing right by the artist and their legacy. You're right. It's like playing God sometimes. But I think we know. That's why I like to have more than one person listen to it. It's not just me making a decision. See, Dekel, you're also a musician. I've played music a little bit in my life, but not to the extent that you have and other musicians. It takes a discerning ear to have the right critique. But we have to ask ourselves these very important questions, because you know what? It's not fair to the artists. They're not here. We're just trying to make the best decisions possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But even all the great artists that I know or learn from or hang with, we're all fans at the end of the day. I mean, it really comes down to that. So I want to talk about the first album that I got from you. I got it at least a year to a year and a half ago. It's Johnny Griffin and Lockjaw Davis live at the Penthouse. So this has a very, very, very special meaning for me, mainly because I got to play with Johnny Griffin and I got to play with Oris Perlin. I was living in Denmark when I was 19 for a year, and I got a gig with Niels Henning Orsted Pedersen. And it really kind of kept me in Copenhagen because I could not deal with the weather. I could not hang. It was too cold for me. And But I got to right towards the end of my stint there, he brought in Griffin for 3 gigs.
Mm.
And this is 97-ish, something like that. And um, man, Griff was at the height of his mature sound. I mean, his later career mature sound. It was unbelievable. I mean, my jaw was on the floor like I could not come. Every minute that he's playing, I'm out of my mind. And it's actually it's pretty well documented the 90s period of Griffin. And it's out of this world. It's very different than what you hear from him with Monk. And also I got to play with Parlin because he was living in Copenhagen.
Amazing.
And it was after his second stroke, so he's playing with one hand and slightly with two other fingers on the other hand. But just every note that guy played felt like the absolute truth. I mean, this guy is like he's just testifying the truth. It was that clear. So this album is super, super, super important for me. And just the choice of tunes. I mean, a lot of blues, obviously, when you're talking about Lockjaw Davis and Griffin, but also Sophisticated Lady and that kind of thing. So I want to hear about your experience.
Well, this is this very special project for me because Corey Weeds, my co-producing friend and founder of Reel to Reel Records in Vancouver, he would be happy if I told you. We're not sold out, by the way. We have some vinyl copies left.
But how can that even be real, man? Wait. Anyone who's watching this, I mean, this is live jazz at its absolute best. I mean, this stands for me with the greatest Coltrane live albums, with the miles that are plugged in. I mean, for the way these guys play, this is really the top.
Well, let's talk about also these two, because these guys had a great partnership for many years playing together. You know, the albums on Prestige Records, Up at Minton's Playhouse, the second set, the late set, these were records that really speak to me and I listen to, and I love this music. So to find and discover that there were 2 radio broadcasts that were done of this band, and it was just sitting in the archives, we listened to the music and it was like, this is burning. Like, this needs to come out. So it was pretty unanimous.
And it's all those guys at their best. Art Taylor, Ors Sparlin. I mean, these guys they're the best you can, they're best, really.
It's exciting music, and it's just another extension, another chapter of their ongoing musical partnership. So, 60 years later to have a discovery like this, to me, it's very revelatory. But also, hey, you and me, I'm talking for us here. We love this music, so it's right in the pocket for so much of it, and it's got a groove. These guys really just play their asses off.
Absolutely. And I also think that what you guys are doing is very, very special, because a lot of your thing is about live tapes, a lot of your work. And I think it's easy for people to forget that us jazz musicians, unlike pop or rock, when people they tour in support of the album, I mean, we record so we can go out. I mean, it's always about getting on stage and seeing what the night will bring. And it's always about how music develops over time on tour. And it's always about meeting people before the gig, after the gig, during. I mean, it's the live experience in jazz is really, it's the majority of where the music really lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we talk about how many Coltrane albums there are as opposed to how many gigs they're played, or I mean, so the next that I want to speak about is another very, very, very special one. This is just coming out, Big Joe in Baltimore. Big George. I mean, this guy is playing the best repertoire you could ever hear him. This was where he was already kind of like I don't want to say I mean, this is like mature George Coleman. It's not the early Miles years. It's not even, it's in a slot later with with the quartet afterwards. This is a really, really special pocket in his discography. So let's talk about this. This is an
Yeah,
epic
well,
recording.
this is a recording, I have to say, that my good friend Corey Weeds really championed from the get-go. George Coleman, the Big G, as he refers to him, is just a dear close friend of his. So I have become the de facto custodian of the Left Bank Jazz Society tapes from from the great state of Maryland, where I'm from. Actually, I've been working with a guy named John Fowler. John is one of the founding members of the Left Bank Jazz Society, and he has been controlling this treasure trove of reel-to-reel tapes going back to the mid 1960s. I've worked with John now for the last 3 or 4 years, even a little further back. And we have now started going through and vetting the tapes, transferring them, listening to them. When Corey heard this, he said, Zev, we got to put this out. And I said, it's great. It's also very exciting. First of all, the music is just cooking with the band, which is trumpeter Danny Moore on trumpet, the late great pianist Albert Daly on piano, Larry Ridley, one of the greatest on bass, and Harold White on drum.
White, yeah.
And this is from 1971. So believe it or not, I believe if we look at a discography, this actually predates all the other albums that George Coleman made as a leader. It wasn't until I think around 75 to 77, I think maybe on Inja or Inner City was it, that maybe he had an album that came out as a leader, which is surprising because, he's playing with Miles. He played with Wynton Kelly, he played with all these killer guys, but you don't really think of, I guess, so this is very special for us. And we have a wonderful package with great liner notes written also by Michael Kaskuna, and some wonderful interviews, including George Coleman in the inside, Eric McPherson. It's just
and also the repertoire. I mean, Afternoon in Paris, Joy Spring, Body and Soul. I mean, it's just the most incredible repertoire.
Mm-hmm. I'm holding mine too, actually, here.
There you go.
And it was also very nice too. We had for all those Tone Poet fans out there, we had the great LP mastering engineer Kevin Gray of Coherent Audio cut the lacquers. That's a hometown project for me all the way. And
Absolutely. So let's continue with Monty Alexander.
Okay.
I mean, this is another one of those string of albums that's coming out for Thanksgiving.
Yes, they'll be out for Record Store Day next Friday, November 27th. And then
which is actually tomorrow, for anyone who's watching this.
Of course it is.
So tell me about, again, the repertoire is unbelievable. I mean, anyone that knows Monty, you get to hear Samba, Love You Madly, there's just Body and Soul. There's just so much here.
He's even doing a cover of Christopher Cross's Arthur's Theme. Here's my take on Monty. I've known Monty for a number of years now. I actually first met Mr. Alexander going back to the mid-1990s when I worked at Polygram, and I was involved in an album that he had put out called Yard Movement with his good friend Ernie Ranglin on the Island Jamaica Jazz label. And when I came to Resonance, George Claben and I both were kind of kindred spirits in the fact that we love Monty. I love Monty's piano playing. He is a descendant of people like Nat King Cole and Errol Garner and so many other greats. And he has this charisma and this really beautiful energy that comes out in his playing. And I've been collecting his records for a long time. Flash forward to 2019, George Claben starts working with Monty and starts going through his tape archives. And we found these recordings that were made at a club called Bubba's, which is was in Fort Lauderdale back in 1982. And it was recorded by a guy named Mac Emerin.
A lot of people recorded there, from Jaco Pastorius to a lot of people recorded there. Ira Sullivan, a lot of guys recorded at Bubba's.
But what was really special about these recordings is the legendary recording engineer, Mac Emmerman. A lot of people may know from his work with Aretha Franklin, Eric Clapton, countless others. He had the very famous Criteria recording studio. He brought a truck, man. They had the soundtrack coming and they recorded this music in 24 track. So as far as the fidelity goes, it's the very best.
Sounds unbelievable, yeah.
And the band is great too. Bassist Paul Berner, drummer Duffy Jackson, and also the percussionist Bobby Thomas Jr., some may know from Weather Report. But these guys are really cooking, and it's a great representation of Monty at his very best. And it's a great, wonderful recording. 2 LPs.
Man, I love listening to this. Check this one out. So I want to continue in this unbelievable stroke that you're on. This is, to say that this is special would be a crime. This is Bill Evans at Ronnie Scott's with Eddie Gomez and Jack DeJohnette. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Bill Evans, I think people always associate him with the late 50s and early 60s. Very, very introspective playing, and a lot of ballads, a lot of very quiet playing. But me being I'm actually not just a huge Evans fan, but I'm a huge late Evans fan. I mean, all those recordings with Johnson afterwards, those you could get like a week at the Vanguard, and the repertoire. He's not a guy that changes repertoire a whole lot. I mean, he has a way of going deeper and deeper and deeper into songs. And this is the summer of '68. He's already playing some of these songs for just about 10 years. Some of them he's probably been practicing for 30 years. And it's kind of it's mastery at its best. But that being said, I always felt like that to get in together with DeJohnette, like on those Montreux albums, that brings a whole other side of Evans that is completely different than what people might expect.
I think Mark Myers, the journalist and author, radio host, actually has kind of tapped into this before, mentioning that this is to him. This was Bill's percussive period. If you listen to the drumming with Jack coming into the band and even going into Marty Morell's era, which followed into the mid 70s, there's definitely this percussive side of it, even more, a lot more strength and power to it, that it's interesting. You hear a totally different dynamic. And I love all Bill's trios too. Oh man, the stuff with Mark and Joe LaBarbera is wonderful too. But it's something, there's something very special about this group. When Resonance came along, there had only been the Live at Montreux album with this trio with bassist Eddie Gomez and drummer Jack DeJohnette. Resonance in 2017, first of all, in 2016, we did Some Other Time, which was the studio album from the Black Forest. Then we found the concert from Hilversum in '68 with this trio. And now we have this recording. So, this is our fifth partnership with the estate of Bill Evans. And it's nice to be able to add and unearth parts of an artist's discography, such as this.
Yeah,
now we have these other recordings too, but it's really,
and this is not just an artist. This is an artist that shaped generations and generations of listeners, musicians, and fans. But I also want to talk about the liner notes. The liner notes, the photos are unbelievable.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just so beautifully put together.
Thank you.
And that this has kind of become a staple of your work. But there's also quite involvement from DeJohnette on this. What was the experience like for you to work with him on this?
It was really a wonderful experience working with Jack DeJohnette on this production. Not just Jack, but his wife Lydia, and also their godson bassist Matthew Garrison. It all started back around 2018, where I started making a number of visits to Jack's home in New York, in New York State. And we started going through Jack's archives. I was reintroduced to Jack from his attorney, who I've also worked with, a really nice man by the name of Stephen Reich, who's also based in your city where you are, Berlin. And he contacted me, he said, you know, you should speak with Jack and Lydia. There's some important recordings that they have. And I remember being in Jack's home and him playing this music for us. And I was blown away. It was really exciting to hear this, because for a lot of fans out there, this is like the holy grail.
Absolutely.
When we put out the Some Other Time record, oh man, I got so many countless emails and inquiries from people asking, hey, people are well aware, the fans knew this trio played for 4 weeks at Ronnie Scott. So where's the tapes? Where are those tapes? Well, truth be told, back in 2016, when we were working on Some Other Time, Jack did make me aware, you know, I've got some tapes here, but he transferred them and we listened to them, but the audio wasn't working properly, or there was something that was wrong that led us to believe that it just didn't turn out well, the recording. Well, it turns out it was a multi-track machine, so we weren't listening to it properly. A few years later, there we are, we listened to it, and then it's like this epiphany, voila. So then we realized afterwards that we had something to work with, which is really exciting. This music's going to make a lot of people happy. It makes us happy. It's a thrill when you get to work with the families of the musicians. I've had a chance now to do several deals with Bill Evans' son, Evan, on this, and I'm just really happy. And you know, we have some interesting perspectives. Brian Priestley, the great British jazz journalist and author, who was at one of the evening's performances and writes about that. Also, we had a great interview with Eddie, and I had to get Chick Corea and Jack together, these two old good friends of many, many decades, to talk about Bill as well. So we captured that in a conversation between the two of them. And last but not least, I had been up at the home of legendary comedian Chevy Chase at his home in New York in 2017. A lot of people don't realize this, but Chevy and Bill were very good friends. Chevy used to drive Bill home sometimes after his gigs. They hung out. In fact, Bill even had 2 cats, which he gave. They were kittens at the time, and they grew to be full adult cats and had them their whole lives. There's an interesting connection between Bill and Chevy, and I wanted to capture that. I wanted people to know. And Chevy is also he's a pianist and a drummer and a musician, and in his own right too, outside of comedy, which is something.
Yeah, he's a hardcore jazz guy.
Yeah. So it was just, it made sense. When we put these projects together, I'm really trying to find, hey, what are the relevant voices? Who has something to say that's important? And what can we put together? And of course, the images, we really lucked out. We have some new photographs this time that are making their debut for the first time being published. And that cover of that album is graced by one of the greatest illustrators and commercial artists of all time. I'm talking about the great David Stone Martin, who many folks are aware from his work on Verve, Clef, Mercury, Norgran Records. You know, album covers such as legendary artists like Charlie Parker and Billie Holiday. I knew about this.
All those Ella Fitzgerald ones. This guy's epic. Yeah.
So I knew about this painting from my good friend Cynthia Sesso at CTS Images, which is a photo agency that we work very closely with. And Cynthia, in the mid-1980s, met with David Stone Martin at his home in Connecticut, and she asked him to do this, and he did it for her. And we worked out an arrangement with Cynthia, and this is a new piece of art. I mean, it's making its world premiere too.
Unbelievable. Zev, your attention to details and the depth that you bring to each release is so inspiring, really so inspiring.
You know what's equally inspiring to me? The guy that takes out his checkbook and pays the bills. In that case, George Claiborne. That guy is inspiring to me. He is such a generous guy.
Here's to you,
George.
Here's to you, George.
But all seriousness, he's been so generous. He allows me to run like crazy to come up with the ideas. George, what about this? He signs off, go for it. And then I don't have a gun to my head. Like we have a team that works on these. I got to be clear with you. You keep throwing accolades my way, man. Zach Shelby Cisco, my right hand, my production manager extraordinaire. Yeah. He's wonderful. John Sellards, our designer, absolutely incredible. Our audio engineers, George Klaben, of course, and Fran Gala. We have a team of people, Cynthia Garcia, Raimundo, at our warehouse. It's a small staff. There are only 7 of us that work at this company, but it's a labor of love. And last but not least, Record Store Day, who has continually believed in us, and it's allowed these sort of projects to happen. They've created this. And again, it's just a big thrill to be able to partner with them once again.
So that's happening tomorrow, right?
That is. It is the big day.
I wanna get to the what for me is the crown jewel.
Oh yeah?
I've always been, I mean, the most hardcore Sonny Rollins guy. And this is just coming out. I mean, to talk about the Holy Grail, Jesus, what are we talking about? Just to put things into perspective, Sonny Rollins was probably the guy that ever made the saxophone trio become a thing. I mean, we're talking about one of the most epic live recordings of all time at the Vanguard was Alvin and Wilbur Ware. And that started Coltrane asking McCoy to kind of step out for a minute and just, let the band stroll. And then Ornette Coleman came on the scene, and then, and especially in the past 30 years, so many people have followed his footsteps, playing saxophone trio, whether it's Joe Henderson at the Vanguard, which is now an epic recording from '85. That continued to, yeah, continued to brand from Marsalis trio, Kenny Garrett trio, Joe Lovano trio. There's a couple of incredible Joshua Redman trios now. I mean, the saxophone trio is just, it's almost like sacred ground because where do I even go? So after all this, Sonny also did a couple of trio albums in the 50s, Way Out West. Is Freedom Suite is another. Yeah, and then he came up with an epic recording that's half trio, half with Freddie Hubbard called East Broadway Rundown. And then nothing, crickets, for what, like 15 years or so. There's no album releases. And when he came back to releasing albums, they were kind of different. It was all, the 70s kicked in, styles change, fashion change, culture changes. Zev, what you came up with is nothing short of legendary material. So this is Sonny. It's a live tour plus a broadcast in Scandinavia, where there's a couple of guys that went on. They were kids at the time, but they went on to become legends. I mean, absolute legends. Han Bennick is universally known as the guy that played on Dolphy's Last Date. Am I correct on this?
Correct. Yeah.
But he's on countless recordings in Europe. I mean, if you go to a record store in Europe and you go through the European labels, he's everywhere. This guy's an absolute legend. And Rod Jacobs, I mean, another legend. He played with anyone from Louis Armstrong to everyone and their mother. I mean, really.
Andre Rieu.
Yeah.
So, these recordings are really special. First of all, I got to tip my hat to Frank Jochimsen of the Netherlands Jazz Archive, who I've had the great fortune of working with on a couple of productions, including the Bill Evans Another Time release, where we're co-producers. Frank found these recordings and several years ago came to me. And he had first of all, we've got 3 settings. We have the recordings from Navara Studios where Dolphy recorded Last Date. We have this recording from a television program from a club called the Go-Go Club in Utrecht, I'm trying to pronounce that. My Dutch is not so great. And then we also had a performance that was done in Arnhem. So we really had this captured narrative from 67, and you nailed it. Sonny wasn't recorded to a recording contract, I believe, till 71, 72, when Milestone and he and Orrin Keepnews got back together again. But it's something about the trio. You know, you listen, for me, live at the Village Vanguard, I love these recordings I've heard, even with Sonny, great bassist Henry Grimes and Pete LaRocca. It is playing out there without a net. Come on, man. When you play with a bassist and drummer, what's it like with you? It's daring, it's taking chances, and there's no safety net underneath you.
And I think mostly there's absolute freedom. I mean, if you have a pianist, I almost always play in trio, because if you have a pianist and they're playing a chord, you're either adhere to that or you go your separate ways. But when you're playing without one, you know, it's really, the only limit is your imagination. And there's no one that can come close to the imagination of Sonny Rollins. I mean, especially at that pocket of time. But I mean, this, from what I'm reading in the liner notes, again, I cannot even, how do I go about this release? First of all, it's a triple vinyl release, which is, it's unbelievable. Just look at this. I mean, the photographs, the artwork is unbelievable.
We were so fortunate, Dekel, because on this project, we also had probably more photographs that we had access to than probably many other projects, most that we work on. We had really an abundance of images that had been previously unpublished. Most people haven't seen them before, at least. And there were photographs captured at all these performances.
I want people to see this. You can see the guys, you know, listening to Sonny warm up. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. So what I'm learning here is that he didn't even let them know which tune he's playing. He just started playing, and they just kind of have to keep up. But these guys, I mean, there were probably 20 at a time, and it sounds like a band. I mean, it's almost like a miracle. It sounds like an actual band. It sounds like Sonny's having the time of his life. So after I spoke about how beautiful the release is, how beautiful the artwork, how incredible the liner notes are, and the sound is amazing. Another Kevin Gray mastering masterpiece.
Thank you.
From reading the liner notes, I'm getting that you spoke to Sonny about this.
I did. We had about an hour conversation where we spoke in depth about these recordings and this period in his life. I mean,
I gotta ask you first. I mean, you look back at the kid driving with his dad, listening to West playing Caravan. Were you thinking that, you know, a minute from now I'm speaking to Sonny Rollins about an album that I'm producing? I mean, how wild is that? That's unbelievable.
No, you're not far off. And I have to tell you something. We even had the good fortune of speaking a few days ago by phone. And it's always so nice to hear from Sonny. And when we speak, he's just really such a kind and gentle man and so wise. But it's daunting. I mean, I get a little intimidated sometimes. And you know, I've met Sonny a few times over the years. I think I first met him when I was 19 or 20. And he allowed a whole group of us kids to hang out backstage with him and his wife at the time. And and we did an in-store. I worked at Concord Music Group when we put out the 9/11 album Without a Song. And he and I did a little retail event. I have to tell you though, he is the nicest man. He's so wise and has such knowledge to impart. But when you listen to him talk about this time in his life and what he was doing, I mean, Dekel, he was, for part of around the same window of time, he was living in an ashram in India. And this is a guy so in touch with himself, just so emotionally mature. And just it's great. But yeah, I get intimidated sometimes.
This is the saxophone colossus. I mean, what are we talking about?
I know, and it's nice though, but yeah, I do sometimes feel that way, but he's made me feel so comfortable, and when you hear Sonny laugh, and just sharing a conversation with him has been really such a gift. I feel so fortunate, you know, I'm so lucky.
I have to tell you that the fortunate ones are really us, the fans, because just to be able to read his experience of and the way those years look now through his eyes is it's kind of unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. But what's even more unbelievable is adding a very very vital chapter in an illustrious career. I mean, one of the greatest who ever lived. Um, this is not something from some forgotten period in his life. This is a very very special, very very special tour that not only deserve to be documented, but it's an important release. So Zev, anyone who's checking this out now, this is a string of releases that's all coming tomorrow. I mean, you guys are on such a roll over there. This is Bill Evans, Sonny Rollins,
Thank
Monty
you.
Alexander, and Big George Coleman. It's kind of like you don't sleep at night at all, huh? Just to get all this done.
I have a great team. We work well together. I have to tell you, it's such an enjoyable time working on these productions. They become like your children, you know, and I just, the journey and putting them together. And then when you finally, after months and months or a year or two goes by, here I am with you talking about this. It's great to realize all this and have it come out.
I have last two questions.
Sure.
The first one is, are you guys ever, like, you guys are mostly dealing with pre-recorded material. You know, you don't produce any music. Is this ever a line that you guys see yourself crossing into?
Well, at the Resonance label, we actually do produce new living artists. My co-president, George Claben, does it. So we put out albums from just Christian House, Tamir Hendelman, vocalist Polly Gibbons, pianist Donald Vega.
Amazing. I love Donald.
Oh, and of course,
we should have him on the show.
And Eddie Daniels too. You should have done.
Beautiful. Let's get Eddie. And so that's amazing to hear. And these are all albums I'm about to check out. And the last one is, what's next as far as releases from Resonance? What should we expect?
I'll share with you what I'm working on, a Resonance and outside. At Resonance right now, we're working on an upcoming recording of previously unissued recordings of Roy Hargrove, which we're working with the family of Roy Hargrove.
I'm a huge Hargrove fan. I got to play with him more than a minute.
We're going to have an announcement coming very soon. Stand by for that. But that'll be coming out in April. And then we're also going to be doing, I think, a reissue of one of our other titles in the catalog. I'm working with the Reel to Reel label right now on unissued recordings of Harold Land that were made at the Penthouse and in the 60s. I think it's 62, 64, 65.
Who's in the band?
Hampton Hawes. There's some recordings of Buddy Montgomery. Also Carmel Jones on trumpet. This is going to be a really wonderful
release. I'm the first to get this one.
All right, man. It's going to be beautiful. It's coming out next April. And then later for next year, I'm working with the family of drummer Roy Brooks right now on some inspiring recordings that were done in 1971 at the Left Bank with Woody Shaw, Carlos Garnett, Harold Mayburn, Cecil McBee, and Brooks. And that's going to come. And hold on to your hat, mates. I've got one of the most just elaborative productions that I've ever worked on coming for Blue Note Records, which looks like it's going to come sometime at the end of March. There'll be details coming soon. And just there's just a lot happening. I'm so lucky. Also, I should throw in a quick plug too. I'm working on 2 coffee table books at the moment, which will be coming out in 2021. I'm working on a book with my hero and mentor, Don Schlitten, who was really one of the architects of jazz music. He was a producer and designer for, amongst other labels, Prestige Records.
This is so beautiful. This is
and
all of these projects are so inspiring, man. This is so
oh,
you're
man.
such a beautiful, inspiring role. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Thank you. And last but not least, I'm also working with the family of David Stone Martin on a coffee table book of illustrations of David
Amazing.
Stone Martin. So
And all of
I'm
this,
just lucky, man. I just wanted to keep going. I'm just having the time of my life. I'm also just I'm working hard, but I also I'm really focused on my health. It's you know, to me it's about having a balance now. I'm a single guy. I live by myself, you know, and in these COVID times, it's like day after day after day. I won't lie. I look forward to business hours. Gives me a chance to interact with my colleagues. These are just challenging times, but we've got music and inspiration and other things to uplift us. And I think that we're very fortunate if we can find something and it happens to be a Sonny Rollins release or Bill Evans or Monty Alexander, whatever, George Coleman. It's nice to find things that move us. And I just feel so privileged and blessed to have that, to have an appreciation. And the fact that people like yourself are supporting these releases, thank you so much, man, for all the support out there. I say this to you, I say it to everyone out there.
I'm such a big fan. So let me close by saying, first of all, this is a very Thanksgiving special, a very different kind of episode. I'm so thankful for all the music that I'm getting from residents over the past, just as a fan and as a buyer, over the past 6, 8 years. I mean, I have Billy Hart with Lovano and Leap. I got, I mean, a lot of those CDs, all the West stuff. I mean, I'm just so thankful for your work, and I'm thankful for this incredible community around us that I keep tapping into for support and for encouragement. I'm super thankful for those releases. This is a very special one for me. I'm thankful for Jazz Times for hosting this incredible series. Zev, I'm so thankful for you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I mean, it's such an absolute joy to talk to you about these landmark recordings. Anyone who's interested, all those albums are out tomorrow. They're amazing. Go and get them, and have a great Thanksgiving for you and your family and your loved ones. Next week we're having Corp Winkle, who has an incredible new release called Angels Around. So join us, and we'll see you guys all soon. Stay safe, and Zev, stay loud, and I'll see you real soon, buddy.
You got it, my friend. Thanks again.
All right, bye bye.